Hello and welcome to episode 101 of Daryl Show Your Work. So you know how in previous videos I've gone through a lot of those redundant steps when executing the Metasploit framework. I usually go in, set up a workspace, then search for a tool, and then run that tool. And it gets really redundant. Well, there's a way to further automate the Metasploit commands when in MSF consoles, and then through the use of resource scripts, which essentially allows users to specify a set of MSF console commands to execute sequentially. All right, so I'm going to be writing some of those scripts in here today, and it's not going to be really anything syntactically complex. It's all going to be human readable. In fact, it's going to be those same set of commands that I run in the MSF console, except it's going to just be executing from an actual file that has that has those steps in there as a script. All right. So to get started though, I am going to have to find out what my IP address is and then find a target host. All right. So to start out here, and let me just move this over here. All right. Do an ifconfig. So according to ifconfig, I am on the Ethernet 1 interface, and I am my current IP address is 192.183.179.2. All right. So let's just copy that, and I'm going to paste that here into mousepad. All right, in case I need to recopy it again. All right, so then I'm going to conduct the ping sweep to find our target host. So this bit of redundancy, it doesn't solve this bit of redundancy here as far as any sort of discovery here as far as my IP address or host discovery. But fortunately, it's not. These part of the steps aren't really too bad. All right, so I'm give it my CIDR address, and so I'm going to ping every device that's here on my local network and see who's up and running. Whoever responds are my options as far as target hosts. All right, as usual, we have 1, 2, 3. 1 more than likely being our gateway, 2 being myself, and 3 being our unlucky target host. All right. So we're going to target 192, 183, 187.3. All right, but before we jump into creating scripts and running it against our target, I wanted to show some list of some pre-installed resource scripts within Kali. Okay, and those come pre-installed with the Metasploit framework, which comes pre-installed inside of Kali. So if you have Kali on your system or you run a Kali operating system, you should be able to run this command and see this same or at least a very similar list in your distribution. So I'm going to say list all, and I'm going to give it the name of the directory that this list is housed in. It's going to be user share Metasploit framework. All right, and it's in the scripts directory, and then it's under resource. All right, so let me just check all my syntax there. Everything looks good. All right, so this should give us that full list, and it does. All right, so again, this is just a full list of some pre-installed resource scripts that you could choose from. Again, to automate the whole use of the Metasploit. If you just wanted, to skip all those steps and kind of go through things a bit quicker. And I'm going to open one of these up to show what it looks like inside as soon as this bubble gets out of my way. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at the auto brute. It went up too far. The auto brute resource script file, and let's kind of see how that's compiled. All right, so in order to do that, Let's see, I'm just going to alter this line a bit. So instead of doing a list all, I'm going to use my text editor to go inside. Not necessarily going to make any adjustments, but just want to show what it actually looks like inside. And the one that we're going to look at, it's going to be a lot more complex than anything that I do today, because I'm just going to use a simple example, but just showing you the level of complexity that that it can have when when writing one. All right, we says auto brute RC. All right, let's open that up. Okay, looks like we're in. All right, so if we go, look here, so we can see that it's so from here it looks like it's looking for any sort of installed word list. All right, so it already so right here where we would manually put in the user file for the word list, it already is putting that in. It's using the Unix users.txt. Then it goes then to using a pass file, and then then it sets the pass file as the Unix underscore passwords.txt word list. So it's showing you all the different steps that it takes, and then it sets verbose mode as true. So meaning that it's going to come back, but it's going to show you the whole shebang. So all the failures and all the successes. So if you didn't want to see that whole list of every time the brute force failed to find a username and password combination, you would have to come in here and set verbose to false inside the script. All right, instead of having to go inside the metasploit framework and set it to false. All right. So this just kind of goes through and just shows you how everything gets set sequentially, all right, to run those same list of steps, but it's doing it in an automated fashion, so we don't have to necessarily set those parameters manually inside of the Metasploit framework. So I'm going to exit out. All right, and so all right, so now I'm gonna get to actually creating a few of these resource scripts to show you what it looks like. All right, so the first one I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make a multi-handler um, 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 resource script. All right, for those that may not be aware of what multi-handler is, it works a lot like netcat listener in the fact that it's going to set up a listener. So if I'm then trying to set up some sort of connection to a remote host, it's going to then catch that connection and then give me a session with that remote host, given that I've somehow found a vulnerability and such. So again, it's Metasploit's version of Netcat Listener. It's essentially it's a listener that's waiting for a connection. And so I'm going to there's a series of steps that you would take to to be able to run out of Metasploit. I'm going to put it all in the script for us and then show how it automates that whole thing where I don't have to go inside a Metasploit to set all that up, but it's going to do it for me. All right, so I'm going to use my text editor again, and I'm going to tell it that create a new file called handler.rc. All right. So now I'm gonna start off with the first step, which I would have to, when I go inside of the Metasploit framework, I would have to actually say use handlers. So we're gonna first have that as the first step. All right. And then you would have to set a payload. So I'm gonna set payload, and usually that payload will probably match whatever. If I make a custom payload within something like an MS Venom, it will have to match the payload that's within that custom payload. All right. So assuming that I'm using a custom payload here, I would set it to that payload. So in this example, it's going to be a reverse TCP a shell. Oops. All right. Just making sure my syntax is all good there. All right. And then of course I have to set the LHOST, which is it's going to be my IP address. So let's paste that in there. All right. And then I have to set the LPORT, which I'm gonna set it to 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and then the last thing I'm gonna tell it to do is to run. All right, so basically Metasploit is going to read this. It's going to, so so basically I'm going to run a usual Metasploit command to start it up, but I'm going to tell it to start it up with this resource script, and it's going to automatically start up multi-handler, choose multi-handler, set the payload, set the listening host, set the listening port, and then begin running. All right, and I don't have to do any of that. All right, so I'm gonna say Ctrl X and then Y to save. All right. So now let's start up the Metasploit framework. Well, let's first check my local directory just to make sure that file is there, and it is. All right. So we can see handler RC right there. So I'm gonna say service, then postgresql start msfconsole. But this time I'm gonna add something extra to the end of MS Console, and I'm gonna say -R for resource script, and I'm gonna say handler.rc. All right, so that's gonna boot up that's gonna start the PostgreSQL database, and then boot up the MSF console, and it's gonna do it by running the instructions of the handler.rc resource file, or resource script rather. All right, so Metasploit is starting up. All right, look at there. So we can see where it chose to use the handler, it set the payload, it set the L host, and it set the L port, and it started the reverse TCP handler, and it started it listing on my IP address at port 1234. Okay, so we can see how it just automatically did that, and I didn't have to do anything other than just to start up Metasploit. All right, so I'm gonna do Control C to exit the listener, and then I'm gonna exit Metasploit. All right, so I'm gonna create another custom resource script here, and I'm going to create one that does port scanning. All right, so say nano. We're gonna call this one port scan. Just keep things simple. .rc. All right, so in here I'm gonna start off with choosing um, the auxiliary tool that I'm going to use. So I'm going to say auxiliary scanner, and then port scan, and then it's going to be, we're going to do a TCP scan. All right. All right. And then I have to, with this one, since we're aiming it at a target, I have to set the remote host. So we're going to set that as our to our neighbor at .3. All right, then we're going to run. All right, so see, just 3 simple steps. Nothing syntactically complicated. You just have to know, if you know the steps that you would though the commands that you would type inside the MSF console, then you know the steps that you have to run here inside of the resource script. But you just have to make sure that you want to put it in the sequence that you want it to run, and that it runs in a proper sequence in order to process properly. All right, so I'm going to say Control X and then Y to save. All right, checking to see if that's in there. The port scan RC is in there. We can see it here at the bottom. All right, so let's boot that up. All right, so we're going to replace handler RC here with port scan RC. All right, let's see what happens. Hopefully I did not fat finger anything. All right, it's booting up. All right, so it chose to use the port scan, the TCP port scan. All right, and it's basically telling us here, if we look at the end, that it found that port TCP port 80 is indeed open. Okay, so um, that gives me some ideas and maybe some other types of resource scripts I want to run. All right, so I'm going to exit out of Metasploit. All right, so let's create another one. And this one, you know how in previous videos I've said that there's a way to check whether that PostgreSQL database is indeed running. So I'm gonna write a script to automate the check to see if that's running. And I'm going to add some things in there where you know how when we usually do this. I create a workspace. I'm going to write something where it's going to check to see if there's any available workspaces, and then it's going to create a new workspace for us. All right, so say nano, we're going to call this db status rc. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run that db status command. So that should check to see if the Postgre SQL database is up. And then we're going to tell it to run the workspace command to check to see if there's any available workspaces, any existing workspaces available. And then we're going to tell it to create a new workspace, and we'll just simply call this workspace test. All right, and that's going to be it. So Ctrl X, Y. All right. So let's get that running. All right. So that's db underscore status. All right, so let's see what happens. All right, so it's checking the database status. All right, so it tells us that yes, we are connected to the Metasploit framework, connection type Postgre SQL. All right, and then it checked the workspace. So far it's saying that only the default workspace is available, and then it created the new workspace dash test for us, and we can see that we are in workspace test. All right. So some other cool things we can do is we can actually load the resource scripts within the Metasploit framework, and we don't necessarily have to be outside of it to load those in. So to do it to load those directly from within it, I could just simply say source and give it a tilde, and then I have to give it the directory that those resource scripts are located. So it's located in my current working directory. So I'm right now I'm in a root. So I could just simply say dash root. Excuse me, slash root. But whatever your current working directory is, or what not necessarily your current working directory, but whatever directory that the resource scripts are in, this is what you have to provide um, msfconsole, the till command slash, and then the whatever the full working directory, absolute, working directory that those are in. All right. So fortunately for me, mine is just simply root. All right. So I'm gonna say post scan RC. Okay. So what this is again, excuse me, not post, port scan .rc again. So this is going to run that port scan again, but it's going to, instead of me having to leave leave Metasploit and then come back in and do this, I could just do this again just to directly inside of Metasploit. All right, see, and it's already it's running the same scan and it's giving me the same result here. That port TCP port 80 is open and appears to be the only port that's open on our target. And I can also run that that database status thing again, except the results are probably going to be a little different since we already have, it's probably going to tell us that the test the test working space exists and that it can't create another test workspace since it already exists. So let's test that out. Let's make sure that the whole thing is just to make sure that it works by running it directly in the Metasploit framework instead of having to continue to boot the Metasploit framework with it as we launch it. See, all right. So it came back and it told us that of course the database is still open, and that it said that right now the workspace that we're in the test workspace, and the default workspace is there, and it says workspace test already exists, switching to it. All right, so that's it didn't create the test workspace because one already exists. All right, so I am going to exit out and exit back in because it'll make sense once I do so. All right. So I'm going to run a script, but the way that the script works is I'm gonna run the script inside the Metasploit framework. But the way the script works is that it runs the last few commands that you ran within the Metasploit framework console. So that's why I'm exiting out and going back in, just so things aren't really convoluted and it's clear as far as what I'm trying to show. So this time I'm just going to boot up the Metasploit framework with it's just by itself with no resource scripts. All right, so from here, I'm going to choose a random module to run. So since we know that port 80 is open, I'm going to choose just a simple version scan. Okay, so I'm going to say use auxiliary scanner. Then we want to specify the protocol HTTP, and the name of the module is HTTP version. All right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a resource script here while in the Metasploit framework. So again, I don't have to be outside the Metasploit framework to create a resource script, but I'm going to create one in here, and I'm going to create one by running basically sequentially running a list of Metasploit console commands, and then it's going to save all those commands inside of a file that then I can then basically use over and over and over again. Okay. So the next thing I have to do is, of course, I have to set our R host. All right, and that's going to be that dot three target host. All right, and then I'm going to simply say run. All right, so we can see that it gave me back the version of the HTTP protocol that it's running. It's running Apache 2.4.7, and then gives me some more information. All right, so then in order to save that into a resource script, I'll just say make RC, and then do /root. And then I'm going to call this, I have to give the name that I want to call it. So I'm just going to call it HTTP underscore version .rc. All right. And this should save this in my local directory. All right. See, it's saving last three commands to root. All right. So that brings me to the end of the video here. And I mean, that's essentially how basic ways that we can use the um, the resource scripts within the Metasploit framework. So just quickly going through what I did here. So I first show how we can then how we can find the list of pre-installed resource scripts here inside of a Kali distribution. All right, and then how that's typically laid out as far as the sequential order in which we want those metasploit or those msfconsole commands to run in. So going by that same logic, I started creating some resource scripts myself. One that basically that scans for any open ports. Another one that sets up a multi-handler listener for us, and another one that checks the database of the data, the PostgreSQL database status, and creates workspaces for us as soon as we log into the metasploit framework. And then I showed how we could directly run those already created resource scripts, how we could run those directly within the metasploit framework, and we don't necessarily have to exit it to run those resource scripts. And then I showed how we can then take some commands that we already run within the metasploit framework, and then save that into a file, creating a new resource script to then run later on. So you can go in here, run manual commands, and just making sure that you do everything in a correct way, and then just basically save your work in a file, and then just run that script or boot Metasploit up with that script again, and just repeat that process over and over and over again. So then you have better automation as far with your processes, and you have more efficiency with your processes, and you're doing things and getting done things a lot faster. So please like, share, and subscribe. Most importantly, show your work. Until next time, take care of yourself, and God bless.